Welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us at what I think is not maybe the most convenient time for everyone, and probably after a long day of joining other sessions. So we really appreciate you being here today. So this is the Breakout 4 and then the RDA WDS Certification of Digital Repositories Interest Group. And at this virtual plenary, we've got the title Towards Building a Trustworthy Repository Ecosystem. And today we'll have the three of the four co-chairs leading. So myself, Rory Edmonds, and then John Petters and Dawei Lin are both here as well. And if you want to maybe move to the next slide, John. So let me start by just saying a few quick bits of housekeeping. The session is being recorded, and we will be making this available on the Certification IG webpage once everything is over. It will also be available, I think, generally through the interface as well. Can we please ask everyone to mute themselves when they're not talking? We'll be mainly using the chat function, so you can raise your hand, add comments, ask questions using the chat function. We may open the mics because I don't think there's going to be a huge number of us, you know, if that seems conducive. Please do ask questions in the chat. Please do use the collaborative notes as well. Please add your who you are in our collaborative notes so that we can make sure that we have a record that you joined us, and maybe we can follow up with you if that seems necessary. I've put a link to the and I've created a bit.ly for collaborative notes, and John is busy sharing that in the chat, the group in the Zoom chat. So please do click on there. Please do sign in, and please do add your thinking as we go along. Next slide, please, John. So really the objectives of this particular plenary are to sort of continue the discussions on our sort of recommendations and for implementing certification of digital repositories, and really focusing on the trust principles and trustworthy repository ecosystem that's helping to build. And specifically, we're sort of looking at the questions as listed there. So looking at the impact of the trust principles and how they've been viewed by various stakeholders, sort of looking at different repository types within the trust principles and the certification process. So generalist repositories, how do they view the trust principles in accomplishing their missions, and how do generalist repositories and technical service providers fit within the certification process, and also the adoption of certification processes. So what have been the successes and challenges of various activities to adopt Core Trust Seal and others, mainly focusing on Core Trust Seal, of course, considering it is an RDA, connected to an RDA output. And then finally, next slide, please, John. So this is just a brief overview of the agenda. So this is our welcome and introduction. Then Dawei will lead the next section on the trust principles, and then sort of giving a bit of an update and some sort of looking at the impact and why people have endorsed those principles. We then sort of briefly look at the recent position paper that was sent out by Core Trust Seal. There was a request for feedback. So I'll give a very sort of brief summary of the webinar that was given recently, and we also have sort of a response to that from Lisa Johnson, who's representing a generalist repository. And then finally, we look at the sort of efforts to engender certification. So we've got a short video by Rebecca Koskeller talking about the AGU's Enabling Fair Data Project cohort. And of course, within all this, we've got discussion time. So without further ado, so I don't want to delay us, Dawe, maybe if there's any words you want to say, sort of leading us into the first section on the trust principles.
Okay, yeah, thanks Rory, and thanks everyone who participate. I know that I think this is not like for some of them are not the desirable hours to have a scientific discussion, but I think you showed up. I think we all grateful that you're doing that. And so the trust principle is a testament that how RDA work, and it is the trust is about the trustworthiness of the data repositories. And this we released the trust principles, the first white paper almost 2 years ago, and then we decided that there is much more audience interest in this, and so the trust paper was published this year in May, and then has been actually translated into Spanish, and also I think is since we cannot be physically at Costa Rica, but we want to keep that spirit. So we are very pleased to have Marisa de Guasti and speak talk about the trust principle in Spanish and have the English title. It's for 5 minutes. And John, if you please play the video.
Will do. Here we go.
Buenos días o buenas tardes. Muchas gracias a la RDA por esta posibilidad de compartir con ustedes brevemente los principios Trust. La necesidad de compartir datos está impulsando la adopción de los principios FAIR, que subrayan la necesidad de adoptar algunas prácticas que aseguren la reutilización de los datos, bien sea por parte de personas cuanto de máquinas. Los principios FAIR consisten en un conjunto de cualidades para conseguir que los datos almacenados en un repositorio puedan ser encontrables, accesibles, interoperables y reutilizables. Pero cabe destacar que FAIR se centra precisamente en los datos y no en la calidad de los mismos o en cómo hacer que los datos cumplan los principios FAIR a lo largo del tiempo. Y esto nos lleva a la segunda dimensión a tener en cuenta, que son los repositorios de datos y su ecosistema. Para que los datos sean FAIR y podamos preservarlos a lo largo del tiempo, necesitamos repositorios de datos confiables, que apliquen buenas prácticas de gobierno, políticas dinámicas adaptadas a la comunidad designada y una infraestructura sostenible, todo lo cual abarca mucho más que el mero ciclo de vida de los datos. Para garantizar precisamente el acceso, la comprensión de sus activos digitales, los repositorios aplican determinadas prácticas y pautas normalizadas, porque tienen la tarea central de administrar los datos, pero administrar, preservar y asegurar el acceso permanente a esos datos implica mucho más que realizar operaciones técnicas sobre los archivos digitales. Para apoyar a las redes de investigación de la ciencia abierta, las agencias y los usuarios, es decir, todas las partes interesadas, los repositorios, deben ser confiables para poder servir de manera tal de garantizar que los datos cumplan a lo largo del tiempo con los principios FAIR. Existen muchísimos ejemplos de obsolescencia de las bases de datos en diferentes áreas. Entonces es necesario modernizar el ecosistema de los repositorios con un enfoque puesto en el servicio al usuario, la usabilidad, el acceso y la eficiencia. Y aquí es donde entran en juego los principios Trust. Estos principios no pretenden reemplazar las mejores prácticas ni otros estándares, sino que se presentan a modo de punto de partida conceptual para demostrar el valor de los repositorios a las partes interesadas. El éxito del ecosistema de ciencia abierta está vinculado a las políticas de intercambio de datos y los aspectos políticos y legales que deben actualizarse. Los objetos de datos deben cumplir con los principios FAIR y los principios Trust proponen que los repositorios de datos garanticen la conservación y el acceso a lo largo del tiempo a los diferentes usuarios. El contexto en un entorno de ciencia abierta abarca a los miembros de la comunidad también como proveedores de datos. Los principios Trust tienen 5 niveles que proporcionan una guía exhaustiva para demostrar a las partes interesadas que un repositorio garantiza la transparencia, la responsabilidad, el foco en el usuario, la sostenibilidad y la tecnología. La transparencia implica que el público sepa qué hace y qué no hace el repositorio. La responsabilidad significa brindar el servicio que el repositorio ha acordado con la comunidad designada. La comunidad de usuarios es primordial y por ende los estándares y prácticas deben ser utilizados para servir mejor a esa comunidad y dar mayor valor a los datos almacenados. La sostenibilidad es la dimensión temporal. El repositorio debe responder a lo largo del tiempo con preservación a largo plazo y posibilidad de comprensión de sus activos. La tecnología se relaciona con la infraestructura y la capacidad de respaldar las operaciones del repositorio. Los principios TAC ya han sido avalados por distintas organizaciones, como ustedes pueden ver. El impacto que tienen estos principios está basado en que facilitan la comunicación tanto dentro como fuera de la comunidad de los usuarios de datos. Por otro lado, la transparencia mejora la confianza tanto en la calidad del contenido del repositorio como en el repositorio mismo. Los principios constituyen un marco orientativo que las instituciones pueden consultar para garantizar una administración eficaz de los datos, lo cual simplifica su labor. Muchas gracias.
Okay, thank you, John, for playing the video. And I hope the people who speak or understand Spanish appreciate Marissa's effort. And also, although I don't understand Spanish, and I feel that the Marissa's passion was contagious. And I think it's, we couldn't find another person to spread the words more broadly to a different language community. And I want to pick up one important point that Marissa left us, which is that the trust principles are not trying to replace what the existing standards or best practices. And I just trying like using this slide to put the things in the perspective, because at RDA, probably you're going to hear a lot of acronyms. And the slide actually was really built on top of the ideas that Wim Haugo presented in the Trust Principle Mini Symposium some time ago, and the visual is improved by Kim Pruitt from National Library of Medicine, NIH. And so what this slide showed you that is that the trust is really a inspirational framework to try to unite the trustworthy data repository that to make all the stakeholders know that the trustworthiness is important. It is the value that we hold to make the fair data long term. That's what we hope that the trust deliver the message, and the trust will really kind of the consensus from the frameworks, like the desirable characteristics from the Office of Science and Technology, like in the US. and also that there was some different type of metrics framework, and also probably like a lot of people working in the repository field will know the Open Archival Information System, and that is the framework that gave the guidance but not the detailed implementation, which the implementation is done by the detailed standards like a Culture Seal, ISO standard, and then DIN standard, and the detail is at the level that the reviewers from a different field that can check a certain repository's data against those their criteria to see if they pass or not. So so that's the I think the point that we want to make, that the trust is inspirational, the concept that we're trying to promote, just like what the FAIR for research data. And then next slide. And since the trust paper published in May this year in Nature Scientific Data, and there's a lot of attentions, like you can see. So you can see that on the slide, it is in the top 5% of all research output tracked by our metrics. And then there's a lot of blogs actually talk about the different perspectives of trust principles. The 3 blocks is really tracked by our metric, but we know like there's much more than that. And now I think it was very I think interesting that even we have probably less than around like 6 months, we already have 7 publications cite the trust principle paper, and we very pleased with that. I think the trust principle paper actually doesn't like the research paper, which is when you publish paper is the summary of the work. And for trust principle is you publish this paper, the work just started. And then I think in the next 1 or 2 years, we want to keep promoting that, and just like what the FAIR principle did for data. Next slide. And so so far we have the 33 organizations have already endorsed trust principles, and we wanted to see what they're thinking. So this is our this interesting group, and they developed some questions and to see what people think, like for this, especially this endorsed organization, what do they think about the trust principle? Why they want to endorse a trust principle, and what impact they have seen, and what they have done, and what the obstacles they have. And so in the next few slides, I want to go through the summary of the responses. Next slide, please. So the first question, like why organizations want to endorse trust principles, and the reasons is that the trust principles represent the commitment that for the certain organizations that promoting their best practice and improve their normative structures, and also that the trust principle can help the alignment of practices and policies with the community they serve, and then this organization, some of the organizations did think about that the trust is not is a complementary to FAIR, is to make FAIR long term, and also that since as Marissa talk about the trust principle is an overall guidance, so people are using them to see where they missed and then where they can improve, and then the last point is that I think they have the organization have a really forward-looking that the trust principles are helping build up the entire the data research data ecosystem. And then the responders I list below from the those organizations. Next slide. So what impacts have done, like, the trust principles have done for those organizations, and then this is all the impact this organization have received. And the first point there is that when they write some proposals for their research, and then by following the trust principles, that they definitely support their intellectual merit of their proposals, and they trust and help reaffirm the repository's missions, and it showed their stakeholder once they endorsed it. It seems that the stakeholders think like feel that the repositories or the organizations that do agree, like have that commitment to their to the data holding that they managed, and also that this kind of very interesting point is that the people perceive that the trust is represent international community. It's not just like a particular community, and also that by endorsing this, and the leadership understand. I think that maybe that's from the succinct message, the trust that present, instead of you talking about a lot of criteria, and people know what the trust is about. And then some organization has not see the actual impact yet, but it seems like they're very optimistic that in the future that the trust will have impact on them. Next slide. And so then what they have done by not just endorsing trust principles, but using trust principles in their actual work, and some of the suggestion from them is that they continue to promote the trust concept with their communities, and also is that as a guide, and some kind of the organization do better in certain areas, some versus other, and then that kind of I like help them to identify the area they need to improve, and that's what they're actually doing, and it was very interesting that to see also the people use the trust principle to guide their certain the current certification processes, and actually that was really I'm really happy to see that, because the trust principles are for that purpose. We don't expect every repositories get certified, and some repository may never get certified. Is because they need a lot of resources to make sure the trustworthiness is there. But we want the repository, even they don't get the certification, they will follow the principles to help improve their operations. And then the trust principles help their planning. And as I mentioned, there's I think maybe 2 months ago, and the Canadian Research Alliance host a trust symposium and host the trust seminar, and now trying to see if use that guidance and to launch a repository certification project. So there's a lot of happening there, and we think that is a good sign that the people are thinking the trust principle like really deliver the message, although there's still work need to be done. So that's the summary of the survey, and we also now have a 1-minute video from GigaScience that they make the video and to see what to tell us what they think. So John, if you could please to play that video for us.
Hi, I'm Scott Evans, and I'd like to talk about GigaScience's endorsement of the trust principles. As GigaScience and GigaDB are promoters and disseminators of open science and open data, transparency and technology have been a very big part of our remit and reason of being, essentially. Now, reading the trust principles, we thought they would be useful in helping us improve some of the other parts of this whole trustworthiness concept that we may not have focused so much on. And as we've been undergoing CTS certification, the areas of overlap have been very useful to help us prioritize and understand the rationale for the things we're being asked to do and implement. We always assumed and felt, we're very transparent and trustworthy, but we, like everybody, can take a lot of the finer details for granted. So thanks to everyone who put this together.
Okay, thanks Scott for making the video, and it's very fitting for the format from virtual, and so that's, I think, is a brief update for the trust principles and also what the people think about trust principles after the endorsement, and so next, I think we want that open the floor for discussions, and we posted some the questions that we asked for the in the survey, but feel free to ask whatever you think the interest to you, and I think the goal is that I think in the next 1 to 2 years. We probably will continue to promote the trust principles to different communities. I think it's just like the FAIR principles that they kind of spend the first 2 years to reach out to different research data community, and that's where we're trying to kind of follow. So now I think that let us know what if you have any comments or questions.
So I think people can use the chat, but don't be afraid, I think, to open your mics as well. We haven't got we've got a reasonably nice size audience, so I don't think it's going to be a huge problem. People want to just open their mics. So I think the question first and foremost is, is anybody here from an organization that did endorse the trust principles or is thinking to endorse them, or if they haven't, have they seen any impacts otherwise since the trust principles were released? Or would there be any reason why your organization would not be interested in endorsing the trust principles as well?
Hi, this is Ted Haberman. Has anybody looked at the comparison of the implementation of core trust seal and trust principles and sort of mapped connections between them? Or we've got roughly 100 CTS repositories. What might the process of those repositories implementing the trust principles look like?
Ted, I think that's an excellent question, and I think that's what I think what we see, that how people are reaching out to promote trust principles. And one effort I know, David Geretta, who lead the development of OAIS, and he just sent out a draft of the mapping between Culture Seal, ISO standard, and 16613, and also the team, and also the trust principle and FAIR. And so they kind of trying to map them all together and to see where the overlap is, and where the kind of the missing parts are. So I think it's just starting, and I think we don't see like there's a very detailed mapping yet, but we see those efforts are coming.
Well, if there's a link to a document or something like that, it'd be great if there's something that's open about that comparison. It would be great to see it in the notes.
Okay, I think so. It is an open. It's an open forum. Is the people who are interested in talking about the OAIS. I don't have the link right now, but I'm trying to look for it, and then if it's not like during this workshop, maybe we can put into the forum.
Great, that would be wonderful. Thank you so much.
Sure. And in the chat, Daniela, that I think that represent the Dryad, and which endorsed the trust principle. Yeah, thanks for that.
Yeah, I can just say that we were happy to endorse them, and we think that what was written in it was great. We just don't have any experience to draw from, because they're just not widely dispersed and understood yet by the stakeholders that we work with. We have definitely found that being Core Trust Seal certified using the backend repository has helped in discussions with institutions and those that really acknowledge Core Trust Seal as a standard. It just seems like maybe right now the trust principles, it's just too soon for us to see what that effect it will have for us.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thanks, Daniela. And also Anna Van Glick, also that represent the Figshare. I think there's a lot of comments I took out from the Figshare response. So Anna, do you want to add a little bit more words on that?
Yeah, I'll just say hi. So yeah, we were really happy to endorse the trust principles as well. We felt like they were already, they were aligned with the mission that we have to provide support and infrastructure that, meets these trust principles, preservation and trustworthiness, access. And so this has kind of just reaffirmed our mission to build that policy compliant infrastructure and to help move the whole community forward. One thing we're really interested in looking towards the future is fair data and reviewing data sets. So the responsibility pillar was kind of a particular interest for our future plans and thinking about what that might mean in the fair data world of repositories.
Okay, thanks, Anna. Yeah, I think I totally agree with you. And this is when we talk about the trust principles and if you look at the people's the materials and the responsibilities hardest part, because the people always think about responsibilities other people's job, and I think to emphasize that the responsibilities that the repository have for their communities is very important. So Bob also mentioned the CEISNIN.
Season. Yes, we were pleased to endorse the trust principles for digital repositories. We find that they are not only inspirational, but they help us to continually improve what we're doing and how we're doing it for the user community.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks, Bob. I think some of you may know that Bob also is a co-author for the trust principles, and this is very I think we all benefit the intellectual input from Bob.
So I think we need to move on somewhat soon, but Dawe, the one thing that I wanted to sort of bring up, because it may be nice to sort of engage people a little bit in this very quickly, is Barbara Stearman sent her apologies, but mentioned the fact that we had discussed the potential of creating a working group around trust under the IG. Now, forgive my memory, but I can't fully remember the details of what we were possibly envisaging there. So I wondered if you could maybe sort of remind me and sort of maybe introduce everyone here to that idea and see whether anybody has any immediate feedback that we could sort of then begin to explore this a little bit further.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, thanks, Rory, to bring that point up. I think we did talk about at the last plenary. I think so we're waiting for the paper published and then see how people respond to it. And I think we can say it's very positive, from even more from comments today. And so the RDA does have this mechanism to help implement the certain ideas more concretely, which is it's called a working group. And then we have 18-month time period. And then I think the idea, I think some people also bring up is that I think promotion and help implement trust principles is a very important next step. And so I think, so what did people think about, like, I think there earlier, like they mentioned about the mapping between trust principles and other standards, and maybe some practices, best practices and criteria we're not like really heard from them yet. So what people think about how much, I think it was more like, what is interest from this group that we form working groups that like to really actively do that, like promote that mapping or maybe implement that mapping.
Or maybe it's food for thought. So if people do have some interest in this, oh, sorry, Kevin, please go ahead.
I guess I wonder, before embarking on a mapping exercise, who is the audience for that? What we're trying to achieve from it? Because at the moment, it's an interesting exercise to go through mapping across standards, but in this case, I'm not sure what we get from it.
Yeah, I think that's very important point. I think the certification, I should maybe like from the bottom up approach. So the certifications of the repository normally interested by the policymakers, founders, and also the repository managers. Like, they want to see what if they have the capability to keep repository operating in the way that the people will trust them, in a sense. So that is the target audience for the certifications. And we think the trust principle is like at a high level of the different type of certifications, right? We don't want the different standards to fight with each other. We want to put them work among like work together. So so that's kind of I think that's two key audience that we wanted to target. But of course, I think anybody interested in the trustworthy data repository will like to see that happen.
Well, that's I have to admit that's what I'm not convinced about. I think, I mean, I take your point about the audiences for certification as opposed to the principles and the purpose of them. I don't disagree with that. But I think if anyone is choosing, let's say, to pursue any of the routes available to certification, I'm not entirely sure what the mapping is going to get them. and I think before we commit effort to it, we really ought to understand what the gain is going to be.
Right.
You know, Kevin, there may be, this is Ted again who asked that question. There may be repositories that are interested in trying to do best practices and maybe not even interested in getting certified. So there's FAIR principles, there's trust principles, there's core trust seal requirements. You know, maybe if they are trying to, if they're just being created, say a new repository, and they're interested in doing something that you know sort of has 3 votes or maybe 2 votes as a best practice rather than 1. You know, maybe such a mapping might make it possible for, or might be an interesting mapping. Obviously, you're mapping something that's pretty fuzzy to something that's pretty fuzzy. So it's not like mapping, you know, a title metadata element to a title metadata element. There's a lot of fuzz, but it may be interesting. It may be helpful to repositories that are just starting to think about what they might, you know, sort of prioritize things that they might pursue.
So Ted, this is Danny.
Hey, Danny.
Okay, so can I follow on and ask you about your fuzziness?
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, even if you're starting a repository, what does the fuzziness get you in terms of on the ground strategies and trying to budget for things? If so I'm having a challenging time. I'm with Kevin on this. That is to say that they're aspirational, and if we try and turn something like similarly like the FAIR principles, something that's aspirational, that's providing guidelines but not necessarily concrete, explicit implementation guidance, then it will remain fuzzy, and it will be a conflation to turn it into something concrete. Right. And so at the end of the day, as a repository manager, the on the ground demonstration of trust or fairness or whatever whatever the requirement of the day is something that I can point to concretely. And for us, it was core trust seal. And so I guess I'm having a hard time with the value of trust on top of the mapping of to core trust seal. So if we can point to core trust seal and say, this demonstrates trust, I'm not sure the added value of the trust principles alone.
Right. So yeah, thanks, Danny, for the comments. I think all these ideas are worthwhile to exploring more. I think that's kind of I think we got the suggestion, like see if we have a working group that are working on that. But I think we just add on to see if we can explain Danny's concern a little bit more. Is that like I think they like for trust, like say like for example the first letter, like transparency, and that is a kind of guiding principle. And then if you want to really map to core trust seal, and then that will say that the repository has a mission. The mission need to be clear, and then you need to have the public evidence to support your mission, and then you tell your user what you're committed to do, right? So once you have that that concept in, and you can easily map out like what is the plan are. And I think the trust for us, because I'm also on the core trust seal board, and as several other people are in this, I think in the participant list today. And so there's a lot of criteria that you can map to like all this like the 5 letters, and then this just help you to kind of organize your thought, and then to focus on that repository part I think is important is the people and the management of the resource, right? It's not just about the product, which is data. And then the FAIR focus on products, and trust is focused on people and management. You know, that's why the policymaker or the founders like to invest. And I think so we have many discussions. I think that the people and management part is not emphasized enough. And so it kind of sometimes impact the investment from the founders. And then we hope that kind of message we can repeat and repeat again, and until everybody agree. You know, that is that's kind of the infrastructure we need to put in place to make sure that if we want the FAIR, and the FAIR is there and long term.
So I think we should probably move on to our next act. Dan, you wanted to say something? Go.
So I think we could. I appreciate what Dawei was saying, and from my perspective, it seems like an easy, maybe too trite thing to say is that it seems to me like core trust seal is an implementation of the trust principles, and I don't know if that's accurate to say or.
Yes, it is. It is. I think that so the slide, I think I would just show before. I think, yeah, if we go back, I think that's what we see. You know, like the core trust seal, those actually the actual standards there, right? There's very detailed guidelines and how if your repository can be certified or not. But we don't think that, you know, every repository can be certified or should be certified. Right, but you need like the framework to be there. Like say, if you want to get into the repository business, this you have to follow, right? So that's, I think it is. I think the relationship between core trust seal and trust is one is expirational message, and the other is implementation.
Yeah, thanks, Dawei. Sorry, Jonathan, I didn't mean to.
No, it's good conversation. I think that's nice, but I think so many other people who have given us material to share. We should move along. So thanks.
No, no, I was going to agree with you, John, but I was also going to say I think this is an important and interesting conversation and worth the extra few minutes. And I also would say if you have any more comments or thinking on this, please put them in the collaborative notes so that we can pick up on it and maybe move it forward after the plenary is finished. Okay, so without further ado, let's move on to the next section. So the next section is really just focusing for a little while on the recent position paper that was put out by the core trust seal board, and sort of where we currently are with the status of that, and also a little sort of riposte or response to that from Lisa Johnson, who is representing sort of the generalist repository community and I noticed Lisa's online as well. I think Lisa's still here. Yes. So hopefully Lisa might, I think, has made a few provocative comments in her video that maybe we can generate a similarly interesting discussion. But first of all, I thought I would give a sort of summary of the webinar that was given by myself and Hervé Leurs of the core trust seal board about a month ago. Please, if you want more details on this, go to the Certification IG web pages, and we do have the recording of the webinar and the slides, the full set of slides there. But I just wanted to sort of very briefly give a sort of summary overview. So please, next slide, John. So sort of where are we coming from with this? Well, traditionally, it's really been domain data repositories that have sought certification. However, we've really found in the core trust seal since it began in 2017 that the diversity of organizations applying for core trust seal has been increasing, and certainly increasing beyond the traditional domain data repositories. And just please excuse me. And the reality is that the way that the Core Seal requirements and certification are at the moment is that the Core Seal isn't, as it stands, isn't able to respond. But Core Seal actually does wish to provide certification tools to these applicants, and so is examining the characteristics of organizations to really understand how we can ultimately best serve the community. Next slide, John. And why is this important? Well, there's been sort of a demand for definitions. So, what is what is a generalist repository? What is a specialist repository? What is a technical repository service provider? What are the differences among these different things? And in particular, there is really a need to define what is a specialist trustworthy data repository. More than this, we really it's sort of vitally important to really ensure that all entities in the data ecosystem that are designed to preserve and protect the world's digital legacy are appropriately recognized as being trustworthy, and we genuinely believe this in the Core Trust Seal board. And then there's also this sort of additional issue that digital preservation is now carried out in increasingly complex partnerships where repository functions and responsibilities are really distributed and shared among different organizations, and that really does add sort of an extra layer of complication to the issue. Next slide, please. So what's the process been thus far, and what are our next steps? Well, so basically, Core Trust Seal, as mentioned, has really had an increasing number of applications that are outside the current scope of the certification, and so initially a working group was created to really look at the certification of these generalist repositories and technical repository service providers. And we invited members of the community to really be part of that. But the board sort of realized that really to make significant progress, a sort of position or viewpoint was needed to stimulate the discussion. As always, people are much more willing and likely to respond to something if you put it out there than ask them to create it from zero. So a position paper was released to the community in June 2020, and we gave everybody a 4 weeks to respond to that. And the position paper focuses on the certification of generalist repositories in comparison to the specialist curators, and also starts to look at the definition of TRSPs. And this is, again, the categorization of these are a little complex, and because there are many different types and they need to be sort of broken down. Next slide. So we had 37 different individuals, groups, organizations responding, and over 550 individual comments and pieces of feedback. The board consolidated, categorized those responses, and then the individual board members were really sort of requested to review the feedback, looking at how we might revise the document to sort of capture the community consensus, and also identify open questions, challenges that require some more thought by someone, whether that's Core Trust Seal, the community, or together. We're currently in the process of completing that and putting out a second version of the paper, and we also hope to give individual responses where needed to sort of the very specific feedback that's been given by some people. And then we will hopefully have another round of consultation and a final version of the paper released, and also we might publish this as a journal article with some additional thinking. Next slide. So I'm not going to go into any detail of the overview of the responses. Hervé does that very well in the webinar, and again, please go and look at it. But I just thought I'd just very briefly say that realistically, when it comes to the requirements themselves, the background information there doesn't seem to be a huge need, according to the responses, to differentiate between the different types. However, there are some clarifications that are potentially needed and have been suggested. When it comes to the organizational infrastructure components of the Core Trust Seal, the R1 to R5, they're equally relevant to generalist and specialist repositories from the feedback received, and as well to the TRSPs. But the expert guidance in R6 is maybe less relevant to TRSPs. Next slide, John. Thanks. For the digital object management part of the Core Trust Seal requirements, there is a need to distinguish the specialist and generalist repositories practice and evidence, especially more specialized services and more specialized designated community needs mean there are more complex and specialized practices that need to be elaborated. And then in the sort of technology part of the requirements, the same levels of practices and evidence were really expected from the responses received, but the security practices obviously need to be informed a little bit more by the data type, for example, sensitive data. Next slide, John. And remaining challenges, well, will everything be solved by Core Trust Seal? That's probably not going to happen, but we really hope the community will work with us to solve them. There needs, with all of these things, to be sort of some familiarity in the community of really what we're trying to do, which is to create sort of these 3 tiers of certification. And these 3 tiers are actually dependent upon each other. So each builds upon the lower tiers. And this is something that needs to sort of seep into the community thinking. The definitions of preservation and designated community are really important. So we need to make sure we get them correct, as is this idea of outsourcing potentially long-term preservation. There really, if that is allowed, there needs to be a level of oversight and control by the applicant, and we need to sort of explore that in realistic cases. But the position paper is only a start. Continued discussions are needed, and anything that really impacts the requirements themselves need to be part of the next official review. So that's where we are at the moment. Again, I encourage you to look down, view the webinar if you didn't do so. And now I think we have the video by Lisa. So John, maybe if you can bring that one up. Thank you.
Hi there, this is Lisa Johnston, and I'm a data librarian at the University of Minnesota. I'm also the principal investigator for the Data Curation Network. We're a collaboration of 12 data repositories that support each other with all the wide variety of different data types and file formats that we all receive in our repositories. So today, thank you so much for the opportunity to speak to you, and I'll be addressing the 2 questions that were sent beforehand. The first was to comment on the new model that allows us to really look at how data repository certification might be more communicated, I think, to the general public, which is the trust principles. I think these have been really useful for me personally as I'm going to my administration at the university and describing why it's important for us to get a Core Trust Seal certification for our repository. What the trust principles really did was break down all the key elements that are embodied in the Core Trust Seal certification process, but are really translated for an audience who might not be working in this field every day. So that just made it a really quick shortcut for me to
Technical errors.
to make the case and to allow our institution to seek out the certification. So that's one. The second question is really looking more at the Core Trust Seal white paper on updating the certification elements and breaking out maybe the elements to look more specifically at 3 different types of data repositories: specialist data repositories, generalist data repositories, and technical repository service providers. I have some reservations about this approach. In some ways, I think breaking us out by these various flavors of repositories, I see why we're talking about it, because we, in institutional repositories like mine or generalist data repositories that handle multidisciplinary data sets, we do have a worldwide audience for data reuse, and therefore our community of users is less well defined, and the types of work that we do in terms of special interfaces and search parameters and even metadata schemas have to be more generalized as a result. On the other hand, I think that layer of breaking us out by different types of repositories based on who might be our users is quite limiting, because I would argue that even specialist repositories who have very well-defined data types in their repository and standards are still really striving for a broad global audience. They might still be serving not just the researchers for their data type, but also educators, students, high school students, artists. I've seen a wide range of uses of data in ways that I could have never have foreseen, and I'm really happy for that. So I think we all have a very, very broad audience. I think another way we could look at this breakdown is what I recently saw in the report that came out of the National Academy's forecasting costs for biomedical research data. Here, the authors took an amazing view, in my opinion, around how to look at the data lifecycle in terms of 3 stages of data repository work. And the stages really place these repositories on equal footing. And most importantly, I think it brings in the perspective of the researcher who is doing curation work, who is working very hard to organize their data, manage their data, sometimes even preserving their data and sharing their data. So that was active stage 1, actually, in the framework, where all the work that the researcher is doing to collaborate with others and to put their data in such a way that others can access it. We have to recognize that work. So I loved that's one stage. And then stage 2 was more of the specialty repositories, the domain repositories, where a lot of work goes into understanding those user communities and then enriching the technology and the repository system and services and support for that community. And that involves all kinds of elements that multidisciplinary repositories often can't achieve, such as setting up environments where you can do computational analysis across all the data sets, really enriching the data set in such a way that they can be interoperable. And that is so needed. And then the third stage was the preservation environment, where the data are in a stable home, where they are stewarded for the long term. And that is also where I see repositories like mine, institutional repositories, where we were providing a place for not just researchers to come and use, but also for those disciplinary repositories, a home where they could pull from our preserved well-stewarded data assets and pull them in to some of those specialized environments. So to me, that view really struck a really natural balance between each of these different types of providers. And it put us on a very equal and symbiotic playing field, because the report really made the core recommendation that this is not a linear life cycle, that data moves back and forth throughout all of these 3 stages. So that's where I maybe would like to focus a little bit more time and attention in understanding kind of those views, and also really bringing in the researchers' repository-like efforts and acknowledge the work that they're doing. So thank you very much again for the time, and I hope to have a continued discussion about this.
So thank you, Lisa, for that video. It's really interesting, I think. So I think now we are back to having time for discussion, unless I'm wrong, John.
Yep, we can have a little time for some discussion here about that, about what you've presented, and then what Lisa has to say, and it'll be interesting to see what the response of the audience is.
Yes. So if anybody has any comments, questions about either the position paper or the sort of response to the trust principles and the paper by Lisa, then please go ahead. And Lisa, if you're still with us, if you have anything you want to sort of add to what you said, then please obviously do so.
And I know there's a couple of other representatives from Generalist Repositories as well, so maybe they have something, some input to add.
Hey, John, this is Ted Haberman again. Lisa, you mentioned I think an Academy report in your video. Is it possible, if that's publicly available, could we get a link in the notes?
I'm just seeing if I can find it, in fact.
Lisa said it's already linked, which is
good.
Thank you.
Even better.
I did put that link in earlier today. Yeah.
Thanks, John.
So, I mean, has anybody been? So I can completely understand where Lisa is coming from, and I think what she's said is very important. And I don't think we're trying to sort of denigrate anyone. You know, we're not trying to say that the work of any of these tiers are lesser, but it's more the fact that if we want all of them to be part of this sort of trustworthy environment, and that we expect all of them to be potentially certified if they wish to be, or you know, then there needs to be some sort of differentiation, because the one thing we found that when it comes to the way Core Trust Seal exists as it is, the concepts of preservation and designated community as we have them, are areas where more generalist repositories are really struggling, and certainly the sort of technical repository service providers, you know, they really are focusing obviously on the more sort of technical infrastructure. So that there are elements of the sort of other areas of the data object management process that they're not really involved directly in. So I wonder if that, you know, anybody has any thinking around this.
I just mentioned my experience, Kevin, actually here. It's kind of overlaps also with the next item on the agenda. In the context of the Fair's Fair, a European project that's trying to do a lot of things around fair data, one of which is shepherding more repositories through the Core Trust Seal process, but also trying to learn from them what challenges they're finding in it. So we've got a number of generalist repositories involved in that. I've been involved in some one-on-one support calls with them where, you know, they're providing us with their draft self-assessments, and we're trying to provide an opinion on how the reviewers might look at it. And although there are times where the language in CTS gives them some pause for thought, because it is indeed written with an assumption that we're talking about a highly domain-focused repository, I don't think it takes too much interpretation to understand how to apply it to a generalist one. And from that point of view, I think I can understand that Lisa's concern that we're thinking of these as tiers. And I think there is an argument for your idea of separating out service providers in some way. where there is something concretely different happening there, and a repository only emerges from the conjunction of a service provider and a user of that service, together which you've got a repository, and that's, you know, that's easier to see how it's certified than certifying the service on its own. But I know we're only partway through this process, and I hope we are going to be able to provide you with some more insight as to whether or not you need to change CTS itself when you're coming to the review in 2022, or whether instead it's just going to be a matter of providing guidance that's different for different communities, but keeping the standard itself the same. And I know I'm guessing at the moment, but I think that may be achievable.
And you sort of hit the nail on the head a little bit with some of your that final comment, Kevin. I think the point is here is we don't want to fundamentally change the core trust seal. We want to try and use what it currently exists for the different actors within the ecosystem, and so it's trying to work out realistically how we can do that, and we realize that things are a little bit fluid, that it's going to be very difficult to say, you know, generalist repositories only do X or technical repository service providers only do Y. It's just more the fact of commonly what are they doing, and what could be, you know, how we might be able to sort of differentiate those things. Dawei, did you want to add?
Yeah, I think there's quite some good comments, I think, from Kevin, also Leighton and Robert in the chat. I think I just want to address a little bit about the perspective of, you know, what the culture seal is about. I think it is, culture seal is a community-based effort. So it's not like trying to control the community. It's really kind of serve the community in a sense. So, for example, a lot of culture seal certified repository, it doesn't seems like they will need it. You know, some of them are running for decades, and they already have the trust from their communities. And so some people, some repositories do that. It's more setting out example and make their documents for certification public. So that has been a public knowledge. Like, say, if you want a well-run repositories, this is how to run it. So that's sort of, I think, I feel that's the most valuable part of the culture seal, that to use that to use the certificate criteria to organize the operations. And then I think the culture seal is that those criteria is open, that you don't have to certify, you can just follow that, do the self-certifications. And what the really certification is about is really have somebody else outside your repository, outside your even the scientific domain, to have a peer review how you're doing. And I think that's kind of the learning part we see, you know, it's kind of almost like more than 100 cultural seal certified repository do. So I just want to kind of make that point, is that, you know, this is a community based, and if I think what the Rory talk about the general repository is that I think we hear more and more about the general repositories. You know, they need also somehow demonstrate, you know, how their commitment, right? So then we need to accommodate that. But the traditional domain repository, there's also community. You know, this community have their need. We need to help them as well. So it's not like about dividing their community. It's right, how do you serve different communities and then make sure it is community based. And I think that's kind of the iteration that we're trying to get here.
Thank you, Dawei. That's very eloquently put, I think. Yes, and that's true as well, Bob.
So maybe I'll just jump in, since I'm trying to be a little provocative here. And this comes from my helping to create and then operate the Hubble Space Telescope data repository for a number of years. You know, we never went through any sort of external validation, verification, no core trust seal. Maybe since I left, that's happened. We just did the right thing. And our user community just trusted us because we did the right thing. And when they got data from the Hubble archive, they knew that they could trust it, period. I mean, it was calibrated and vetted by the people who were the most expert in operating this observatory. So I come from this with an admitted bias, okay? At the same time at NIST, we are going through the core trust seal. We've done sort of an internal process right now. We're going to do an external process with all the, you know, all the trappings. I don't know that users of NIST data are going to care. It will make us perhaps a little bit better, a little bit more robust data service. But already, you know, the people who have developed the repository for NIST, they know what they're doing. And so I'm just asking this to be a little bit provocative. What is the net value gained, not for us as providers of data, but for the consumers of data? And do they really care? If they care, okay, but how do we know? So that's my provocative message for the night, and I will shut up and listen.
I can respond a bit.
Oh, go ahead, Kevin.
To that, Bob. So yeah, I mean, I understand where you're coming from to one extent, because I think that was the position everyone was in, say, 20 years ago more. I mean, lots of people who knew what they were doing got together and set up services, and yeah, the trust came. Essentially, we were trusted without having to prove that we were trustworthy. You know, the distinction between those terms. But I think we do have evidence now. Certainly, I see this in university support services and elsewhere, that some researchers now feel, in some domains certainly, are faced with what they see as a baffling choice of where they might put their data. And they are looking for assistance with how to make that choice. And certification certainly isn't the only thing that helps there, but it's one of the things that can help them make that choice, or alternatively, can help the people who are providing them advice make that choice on their behalf and give them recommendations. But nonetheless, saying absolutely, it's that question of you know, what the gain here, given that it's not it's costly for repositories to go through this in time, even if not in money. We do need to be sure we're getting a gain from it. But I think we do have some evidence that it's there. And my own experience, being having helped create some of the things, but also being on the other end of it, being subject to some of these external things, is I certainly feel, however well you think you're doing your job, these things always make you reflect and realize, actually, there is something we could be doing better.
So we're really beginning to run out of time, but I'll give, I saw Leighton Christiansen had his hand up. Do you want to very quickly maybe make some final point before we?
Yeah, super quick. Just thinking about Bob's comment, I think of the United States Department of Transportation as a repository user because we fund so many other researchers who are then allowed to put their data in any repository they want. But we've paid for that, and we have a public service to provide access to that data for decades to come. And so as somebody who both works at a repository and then expects the data that we fund to be spread out across the country, I want certified repositories. We're not there yet. I want to get there, but I want to know that our funded researchers are putting their data in good repositories so that we can get it decades down the road. That's just thinking of us as a customer, as a user, we're dynamic. Our relationship to the data is dynamic because we both fund its creation, but then we have to be able to use it and provide it for decades to come. So that was it.
Thank you, Leighton. That's a really nice comment. Danny, it's very, very quick.
Very, very quickly, I will try and summarize. Rory, thank you for the opportunity. So to comment on Robert, I want to say as a repository prior to engaging and endeavoring to obtain a core trust seal, we were right there with you. As a matter of fact, in AGU 2017, I presented a paper on what it means to be trustworthy versus getting the certification. And then we came around and got the core trust seal certification. And I will say that we have over a decade of following for our repository. It was created to serve a community and we do it very well. And we have trust long before we obtained the core trust seal. And I would add that there are benefits to obtaining the core trust seal beyond just an end user community. And to echo Kevin's comment, there are ever growing early career researchers who will need to go through the process of determining an appropriate repository for their research. And although the trustworthiness of your repository may endure across cohorts of researchers, the early career folks are struggling to find those appropriate repositories and will continue to do so, I think. And so the core trust seal as, say, a demonstration, in particular with the research registry of research repositories, RE3 data, anyone that uses the badging to demonstrate core trust seal certification helps the researcher, to echo Kevin's comments, helps those end users find you and start those conversations and start those relationships. So we found added benefit to it, even though we felt we already had that trustworthy relationship with our end user community. And then to follow on to what Leighton just said, it helped internally for us to gain consensus among all of our domain data managers who work on the data every day. It helped to build cohesiveness internally, even though we already have our standard operating procedures. It helped with checks and balances internally. So there were benefits beyond just communicating trust to our end user community. I'm a convert is what I'm trying to say, that core trust seal. I was skeptical and now I'm a convert and hope that the core trust seal can be leveraged for many of these struggles that we have community wide. I feel like if we can have just one ring to rule them all, so to speak, without being too cliched here, it would be great. So I will stop. Thanks, Rory.
Thanks, Danny. Hallelujah. So I think we might actually, considering the really nice comments you made there, I might come back to you and Leighton afterwards and maybe see if we can get something a little bit more official on some of these things, because it'd be nice to put these kind of messages out to the community when such questions come up. So that's just something that sprang to mind. So we're really running out of time, and I do want to give Rebecca Koskela kindly created a video for us. So I really want to show that. So the reason for this is that there are several efforts out there now, and Kevin mentioned FAIR was one of them, which is putting through a sort of small cohort of repositories through core trust seal. As part of the Enabling FAIR project, there's a cohort of Earth, Space, and Environmental Science repositories, and Danny was actually one of the through Bicodemo is one of the ones that benefited from this cohort. So this is sort of a little partially advertisement of the cohort, because they do still have places available, but also a sort of just what sort of organizing such a cohort is really about. So John, if you play this, and apologies everybody, we are going to run over a few minutes, but I hope you can just bear with us a tiny bit longer after a long day.
Hello, my name is Rebecca Koskela, and I will be presenting on the Core Trust Seal Earth, Space, and Environmental Science Repository cohort. As a part of the American Geophysical Union's Enabling Fair Data Project, a cohort of data repositories was assembled to apply for Core Trust Seal certification. The certification demonstrates to repositories, users, and funders that they've been evaluated by an independent authority and endorsed for their trustworthiness. The purpose of the cohort was to establish a group of interested Earth, space, and environmental science repositories to systematically work together through the tenets of the Core Trust Seal requirements, with the goal of each submitting a certification package with their individual responses to each criteria. By participating in the cohort, repositories are expected to complete and submit their CTS certification application within 3 years from the start date of the cohort in order to benefit from the reduced rate for certifications. The cohort got underway in the fall of 2018, and the deadline for this cohort will be February 2022. So far, we've been using 2 venues for the cohort. We kicked off the cohort with a webinar on October 30th. And in this webinar, Rory Edmonds described what Core Trust Seal is and the process. John Funding from the USGS had been through the process for USGS and was certified and described what it did, how they went through that process. The following month, Ingrid Dillow, Deputy Director of DONS. DONS has been through many certifications, described the process and why they were interested in doing the Core Trust Seal certification. In addition, Helen Glaves from the British Geological Survey described their experience in getting Core Trust Seal certification, motivation for doing it, and lessons learned. This summer, we had a presentation from a cohort member who was just about ready to submit their package that described the process they went through in order to put together their application package. And in July of this summer, we held a panel discussion at the EarthCube Council of Data Facilities summer meeting. EarthCube is a US project funded by the National Science Foundation, and the Council of Data Facilities are the repositories connected with this project. The panel consisted of 3 members of the cohort. We've also met together at meetings where the representatives from the repositories will already be in attendance. These included the American Geophysical Union meetings in the US, the European Geophysical Union meetings in Vienna. In addition, the Earth Science Information Partners, or ESIP, summer and winter meetings, also in the US, and RDA meetings. So some of the successes of the cohort, there's a lot of interest in joining the cohort. Right now we have 25 repositories, and these are global, not just in the US. We've had really good attendance at the webinars, and a big factor for some of the smaller repositories is support for the waiver of the application fee. The big success of the cohort are the 4 cohort members who have submitted their application package. The first was the Research Data Archive in Colorado, and they are certified. The Arctic Data Center submitted theirs next, and they are also certified. And this summer, BICO-DEMO, the Biological and Chemical Oceanography Data Management Office, completed their certification. Right now, the last The most recent member to have submit their package is IRIS, which is a seismology data repository, and that is underway at the moment. Some of the challenges with the cohort, you have to keep the communication going in order to keep the interest alive. It's getting a little bit more difficult because of COVID-19. There are many, many webinars, and it's not always possible to coordinate yet one more. Another challenge, and this is a challenge not just of the cohort, but of any repository trying to do the certification process, and that is resources at the repository in order to do this. Motivations for some of our members have been they need the certification, or at least the application for a certification to get their renewal of their funding from their funder. And also some of the members have been able to fund a contractor to support the application process. The repositories that have been most successful in putting together an application are those where they have someone to lead the process and make sure that it continues working its way through the actual submission of the application. I think the biggest challenge for me is trying to find a way to pair repositories that are just getting underway with the process, or they know they want to start it, but they haven't quite got there, with those who have completed the process or underway. It's especially challenging when we don't have in-person meetings, but once they get underway, I think it will be easier to have more in-person meetings. Also, we have more spaces available in the Earth, Space, and Environmental Sciences AGU cohort. So if you're interested and want to join the cohort, please send an email to me at this email address. And the cohort has an email list at Core Trust Seal cohort at ixuwds.org. I can add your name to that email list. There isn't a lot of traffic, but that way you stay up to date with what is happening with the cohort. Thank you.
So thank you so much to Rebecca for putting that together. Again, I think it's she makes some very nice points there as to some of the sort of challenges, but also the benefits of going through this process and being part of a cohort. We have run out of time. So if there's any sort of immediate comments on this, it would be nice to hear them, but they're brief. Otherwise, please do get in touch with Rebecca. This is a great opportunity if you're interested in becoming certified, but are concerned about the resources or to pay for the administration fee, or you want to be part of a collective and learn from others. So please, so Danny is saying that, you know, it's a really nice platform, and Kevin, these peer support networks, they really are very good. So I'm obviously helping with these cohorts where I can, to sort of in my role as the Core Trust Seal head of secretariat. So any questions, comments, final remarks connected with this? Otherwise, I will maybe hand over to John and Dawe for any closing remarks they have.
Wait, go ahead, Dawe.
No, I think I just want to mention that maybe like after the meeting, we can sanitize the slide and make it available to the interest group.
Yeah, certainly. And the other thing I would recommend is at the very top of this, if you're not already part of this interest group, at the very top of this, I put the link to the interest group within RDA. So, you know, go ahead and join. If you are interested in what you heard about, please join the interest group. We'll send out, you know, very little email, but at least send copies of the, you know, copies of the materials, and you'll hear more what's going on with this group as time goes on, if you're not already a member. Otherwise, I think it's been fantastic. It's been great.
Yes, thank you so much, everyone, and especially for bearing with us again. I know this was not the easiest time slot for a number of people, so we're really, really grateful to you for joining us and for hanging in there until the bitter end. So please sleep well, those of you who are sleeping, and please enjoy your day for those whose days are just starting. I'm somewhere in between. My day is starting, but I've been awake all night, so I think it's bedtime.
Great. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Bye. See you
Bye.
next time. Mhm.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Danny. Do you just stop this, John?
I think I just can end it and we'll be done. So
Okay.
I'll end meeting for all. We're ending.
Yeah, lovely. Thanks.